West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now is seasoned prosecutor and Congressman Adam Schiff. He was, of course, the lead impeachment manager in Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Great to have you. We can get into a lot of these legal arguments, what the Constitution says it means. I trust you and I will do that. But I want to begin with something more basic. A question that is on the mind of many Americans. Why would this time be any different than last?
Well, look, this is a very different presidential abuse. And in this case, you don't need the imagination of senators to wonder what it would be like to be on the Ukraine front lines with Russia and have military aid withheld in order to help the President of the United States cheat an election. These senators were there. They were on the front lines as that mob was tearing through the Capitol. They're firsthand witnesses, in addition to everything else. And the core of what the president did in trying to interfere with a peaceful transfer of power, as the House Manager Brief says, if that's not impeachable to incite an insurrection against that peaceful transfer, then nothing would be. This is clearly what the founders had in mind when they provided that remedy.
Do you think that Donald Trump acted in ways that make it a national security priority to prevent him from ever lawfully being president again, which is one of the remedies if there's a conviction?
Absolutely. It was very apparent after the first trial that if he were left in office, that he would seek to cheat again, that he would do great damage to the country. It is equally plain now that if he is not disqualified from running for office again, then we can expect that if he runs in 4 years, he will put the country through the same hell, through the same lies about the election, through the same false claims of fraud if he loses, through the same incendiary rhetoric and incitement to violence. And that is a very direct threat to our country's security. And of course, it does immeasurable damage to our reputation abroad and the health of our democracy.
How important is it, in your view, that the trial speak to the rest of the country? Because the attack of the 6th was an insurrection. It was violent. There'll be memorials tonight for one of the Capitol officers who died, among 5 total people. It was a trauma, and yet there's so much going on. And people are, as you know, living through a recession and COVID and all this other stuff in 2021, that there's been a little bit of a mood of, okay, that was terrible, maybe we move right on. And yet next week, by virtue of this process, everyone's going to slow down and be hearing this again. What is important in your mind to tell the nation through this process next week, for those who say, well, yeah, it was terrible, we lived through it, we want to move on?
Well, that's a very important question because the managers try this case not just to the senators, but perhaps even more importantly to the American people. And you don't start from the presumption that everyone knows all the facts. Indeed, we didn't start from the presumption that all the senators knew the facts in the last trial. One of the things that the manager's brief lays out so well today is the entire chronology, the narrative arc of this terrible tragedy, with the president saying before the election that he wouldn't accept it if he lost the election, with him making claims in advance that there was going to be massive fraud, with him challenging the election immediately, even when he understood, as we all did, that the first returns would not necessarily be indicative of who would win that state. His efforts to try to force local elections officials and then statewide election officials, his efforts in the courts all turned down, finally culminating in what he viewed as the last chance to stop the peaceful transfer of power. That is, bringing this mob into D.C., lighting the fuse, and setting this tragedy in motion. So that story needs to be told with the kind of clarity that you can in a trial. Number one, because the senators need to do their constitutional duty and disqualify him. But number two, if they don't, the American people need to have a basis to hold their senators accountable, but also they need to know the danger of this man going forward should he ever try to run again.
Yeah, and that really goes to, as you say, what he did. He publicly summoned people to come on January 6th. Not a random day, not a rally day, no, to come and try to pressure what would ultimately be a legal and violent insurrection pressure on that final step in certifying his loss there in the Senate, as I think we all remember. We lived through it. I want to play for you something that may or may not come up in evidence, but it's certainly damning, which is those people explaining why they were there. Take a look.
Our President Donald Trump, asked us to go to the march on the 6th. And he said, be there. And so I went and I answered the call of my president. I felt like my presence on the state capitol steps, on those ivory steps, was more important to me than my very life.
How does that fit into the argument that Donald Trump intentionally, deliberately incited the insurrection?
Well, it'll be up to the managers to decide of the volume of evidence which they want to present. But statements like that people that participated understood exactly what the president was telling them to do, and perhaps even more powerfully, the video of people during the insurrection yelling out that they were there because the president had told them they could or should. That's a very powerful evidence that, in fact, the president incited them to this insurrection. So I think it is very relevant, important evidence. Now, some of the lawyers watching might say, well, can you introduce that, or is that hearsay? It's up to the senators to decide what evidence they will accept and what weight to give that evidence. But all of this is certainly relevant to the abuse of the president's power.
Yeah, and the final question I want to ask you, I'm not making light of this, Congressman, but you've tangled with Donald Trump, and I think you've seen he has a penchant for being often his own worst advocate. That's why he was banned from Twitter over this same incident. And yet it may help him in the long run, because we won't hear as many incriminating things as quickly, necessarily. And so I'm curious, apart from the defenses that he and his team have started to raise, many of which are really weak, what about the more serious argument that people in office, you, Donald Trump, future presidents, they need a very wide latitude to speak. And that while this is not a traditional First Amendment case, and there are nuances to that, we have historically said that they can say all kinds of things, and that you really don't want to set too much of a precedent where words alone can convict, remove, or bar an official. Your response to that?
Well, people need to understand that there's not a First Amendment defense to inciting an insurrection or to abusing the power of your office. If a president says to a foreign power secretly that I will do anything you want because I want to build a tower in Moscow, that's not protected by the First Amendment simply because he vocalizes his corrupt intent. If the president were to engage in bribery and did so through vocalization of the terms of the bribe, that's not protected by the First Amendment. And if you incite people to attack the Capitol, that's not protected either. So it's a false argument. I think it has a superficial kind of appeal to people who don't necessarily understand what's the role of the First Amendment in an impeachment proceeding. But the long and the short of it is there is no First Amendment defense to ignoring and violating your constitutional duty. And even if there were, there is no First Amendment protected ability to incite an attack on the Capitol.
It is Wednesday, the 3rd of February of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome cues? Yes. Are those your cues? You better get them away from the fire before they scorch. Oh boy, are we living in perilous times. Remember when we thought that, after Biden got inaugurated, we could breathe easily? Now, some of us knew that, we'll be breathing easier with the knowledge that, we have a new administration. Knowing full well the obstructive capabilities of the GOP, even before they became the insurrectionist party. Well, officially. And so it's even tougher than some of us even imagined. Who knew they wouldn't pass an organizing resolution so that the GOP would just hold on to committee assignments in the Senate? Oh, silly you. Mitch McConnell is the Grim Reaper. The Senate is the place where democracy goes to die. Because Mitch McConnell made it so. And he really doesn't want to relinquish that kind of power. Apparently. It's gone to his head. Apparently. Well, so that can be damned. We'll just go on with reconciliation, you idiots. And I love how they're going after Joe about these executive orders. It's unconstitutional to sign an executive order to reunite children with their parents. The party of life. That's who they are. Okay. I would, I gotta say, if it was me, I would probably look at the Republican Party as a whole. Maybe figure out a way of disbanding them, defunding them, make them ineligible to be able to run for office. I'm old enough to remember when all you had to do was just say someone was a commie, and that was all you took. That's all it took. The guy would be fired, and it was mostly a guy. They would be fired. They would never be able to run for office. If they were in office, they had to quit. Just merely being accused of being a commie. I think it's time that we started lobbing those accusations, except instead of commie, we call them Republicans. Oh, you're a Republican, and the first thing that comes to your mind is that they are destroyers of democracy, like communism. We hated communism because it was going to destroy democracy. Well, at least that's what I thought. I think really what they were afraid of was going to destroy capitalism. And in the process, democracy would fall too, because, it goes hand in hand. This is the way it works. And we need to have the same sort of mindset when we say Republican as commie was back in the day. They like to now say pedophile, right? Which is, it's really their N-word. It's gone through, a few iterations over the eons. How the N-word is coded. And, pedophile's one. They can also be interchanged with, being a Jew. Because if you look at the list of, the Rothschild pedophiles eating babies. I don't know why it's babies. But anyway, I guess because they're so tender. Most of them are Jews like the Rothschilds. So it's also an anti-Semite trope. Indeed. So we need to be able to label Republican with the same sort of, our internal meaning, our emotional meaning, not the dictionary meaning, but the one that impacts us inside. How we view a Republican as an outsider, a destroyer of democracy, an American hater. And when I say American, I mean they hate Americans with a passion. Because Americans are everybody from around the world who came here to make a better life for themselves and self-govern. The shining city on the hill. Well, left it to the Republicans, and what do? Well, they cropped that mountaintop, took out the city, because that's where all the bad people live. And it looks like great swaths of land have a lot more civil liberties than human beings. Property is people, my friends. Okay, well, we could go on and on about that because there's actually some curated news in the world. Before we get into that, though, I want to mention about the service for Officer Sicknick last night, and it's ongoing. I don't know, by turns, I am so saddened for his family. I'm so saddened for his co-workers. But as saddened as I am also angry. I think the professional term is I'm effing pissed. This guy got killed during a riot, an insurrection that has now turned into an insurgency because electeds are involved. And I'm looking at you, Cruz, Hawley, et al. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe even Squeaky Burbert. Who knows? Might even be Cornyn and a few others. And yet, it seems this 2 tiers of justice that we've been complaining about, the 2 tiers of justice that we marched in the streets about, the 2 tiers of justice that brought the law enforcement out to crack heads. This is very reminiscent about the Vietnam War. Oh, yeah, we were all accused of spitting on the troops. Never happened. Never. Nobody ever spit on the troops from our side. In fact, when they came back, those who sent them there did not want to help them here. And who did help them here? Those of us who were accused of spitting on the troops. We're the ones that got medical help. We're the ones that got housing set up. We're the ones that made sure they got to go to school. Wasn't the ones that sent them there and said, oh, we just love our troops. No, you don't. They're fodder. They're just political capital that you spend without even thinking. And that is how Officer Sicknick is, being treated now. Because I bet, and I mentioned this last night, so if I'm repeating myself, I am sorry. I bet if you go anywhere in America and ask any Republican anywhere how they feel about Officer Sicknick, their response will be, who? This is the country we live in, and we're supposed to make nice with those people. And I say those people with a capital THOSE. They hate Americans with a passion. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, that was Adam Schiff, who may become California AG. I know that's what they're angling for, because if you're going to sue Trump, the states do it. Apparently, the national GOP has prevented it from happening. So I guess one way to keep him from running from office is let him write, his struggle while in stir, like proper dictators do. Indeed. And he is responsible for the Capitol insurrection and riot. Absolutely, that's an impeachable offense, and it should be a criminal offense as well. Oh, let me say one other thing about, the 2 tiers of justice. They had the florist the proud florist. We didn't know she was a florist, but she was the proud Trump supporter. Said, "Oh, we came in there, we're going to fuck everything up." Blah, 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 blah. Well, apparently she had a prearranged vacation for a work bonding retreat. She's a florist. I didn't know RTD florists got together to bond. Judge gave her the vacation. She gets to leave the country while she's under indictment. How is she even out on bail? How is that possible? So, yeah, Trump is responsible for the Capitol insurrection. And when they say, oh, well, we can't impeach him because, he's not president anymore and you can't impeach somebody who's not a president, well, that's questionable in its own way. This impeachment started, and the crime started when he was still president. He incited that riot for years. When he won in 2016, he set up a commission to prove that the popular vote was a fraud, that he won the popular vote. When they couldn't find any evidence of that, he didn't stop. He egged people on and egged people on and egged people on, and then he went up there on the day of January 6th and said, go to the Capitol. You got to be strong. You're going to lose your government otherwise. And when he said your government, he meant the authoritarian dictatorship that Trump wanted for himself. And guess what? He got caught on live TV. On the rest of the menu, Ron DeSantis wants to fine private tech companies $100,000 a day for banning politicians who use their services to spread lies. 4 million teachers have demanded Marjorie Taylor Greene be removed from the House Education Committee, and we're looking at you, McCarthy. And in spite of vociferous Republican opposition, the Senate confirmed Alejandro Mayorkas to head the Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, and ICE is going rogue now. They won't work for a brown person. They only know how to lock them up. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Biden administration is in no hurry to engage China, and will do so once it is in lockstep with allies and partners. And 2 Polish historians face the first legal test of a 2018 law that makes it a crime to accuse Poland of atrocities also committed by Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is our chat room link. Right there by the social media scroll, the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link and social media scroll, off to the left there, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could send us the equivalent of, how about an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continuing our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago, and we have your generosity to thank. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. And you can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Put that up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, go to @CookbookWest. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They're everywhere. Okay, we got another Florida man here. We got two Florida men of prominence in Florida right now. And this one happens to be the governor, and Oliver Willis of the American Independent brings us this offering about that Florida man. Here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis proposed fining private tech companies who deplatform politicians who use their services to spread lies.
Under our proposal, if a technology company deplatforms a candidate for elected office in Florida during an election, a company will face a daily fine of $100,000 until the candidate's access to the platform is restored.
DeSantis told reporters in a very terrible accent, by the way. The proposal comes less than a month after Twitter banned Donald Trump for life. The service removed Trump after he repeatedly praised and encouraged his followers who attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6. Trump also used the service to promote lies and conspiracy theories about the 2020 presidential election, repeatedly asserting that he won the race and that it had been stolen by Democrats and President Joe Biden. DeSantis campaigned in Florida's 2018 gubernatorial race on his close alignment with Trump. During the 2020 election, he campaigned for and with Trump in Florida. Republicans, who have traditionally supported allowing private businesses to make their own decisions, have become increasingly critical of big tech, as social media companies have enforced policies designed to curb the spread of misinformation. Amy Liu of the American Independent brings us this next offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Two of the nation's largest teacher unions, representing more than 4 million teachers, sent a letter to House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy asking him to remove conspiracy theorist Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from the House Education Committee. Presidents of the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers co-signed the letter. Conspiracy theories do not belong in our schools, they said. The letter comes after Media Matters for America unearthed Green support for false flag conspiracy theories related to deadly school shootings in Parkland, Florida, and Newtown, Connecticut, suggesting they were fake events designed to take guns away from people. She does not have the judgment, empathy, or wisdom to be entrusted with the responsibility of overseeing legislation to provide the secure, supportive learning environments that students deserve, the teachers' union wrote. A recent CNN report also noted that Greene had liked a 2019 Facebook comment that said, "A bullet to the head would be quicker," to take out House Speaker Nancy Pelosi from her role. She is an adherent of the baseless QAnon conspiracy that claims a secret cannibalistic cabal of prominent Democrats and celebrities are engaged in international child sex trafficking. Also, we're supposed to be eating the babies, too, and drinking their blood, too. Well, you know what? I like my baby back ribs with Podesta risotto. Doesn't everybody? Others have spoken out against the Georgia Congresswoman, calling for Republican leaders to take action or for Greene to resign. Linda Beagle-Schulman lost her son, Scott, a Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school teacher in the 2018 Parkland shooting that left 17 dead. She's demeaning my son's memory and demeaning memories of all the other children from Parkland and from Sandy Hook, and it's wrong, Schulman told CBS in an interview. Shannon Watts, the founder of the gun reform group Moms Demand Action, said in a statement on January 21st, dangerous conspiracy theorists who peddle disinformation like Representative Greene ever further damage the credibility of Congress. Greene's lies traumatize the survivors of shooting tragedies and put their safety in danger. She must resign immediately. Thus far, McCarthy has refused to commit to any actions against Greene despite mounting pressure for him to deal with the backlash. The House Minority Leader instead told Axios that he would have a conversation with Greene, and we know what that conversation was about. Hey, look, lady, you're making a lot of money being a Looney Tunes. We want some of that cash. Meanwhile, Democrats are taking matters into their own hands. Democratic Representatives Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Ted Deutsch of Florida, along with Connecticut Representative Johanna Hayes, introduced a resolution to strip Greene of her committee assignments. If Republicans won't police their own, the House must step in, Schultz told reporters. Ted Hessen of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The U.S. Senate yesterday, Tuesday, confirmed Alejandro Mayorkas to head the Department of Homeland Security, making him the first Latino and immigrant to hold the position and further solidifying President Joe Biden's cabinet. The Senate approved Mayorkas by a vote of 56-43 amid strong opposition from the Republicans. As Secretary of the sprawling agency, Mayorkas will oversee a 240,000-employee department responsible for border security, immigration enforcement, cybersecurity, and disaster readiness and relief, among other missions. Mayorkas, age 61, will also stand at the center of Biden's attempts to reverse many immigration restrictions put in place by Republican former President Donald Trump. Mayorkas is the sixth of Biden's cabinet nominees to receive Senate confirmation. Earlier yesterday, Tuesday, the Senate confirmed Pete Buttigieg to be Transportation Secretary. Mayorkas takes the helm at DHS just days after the department issued an advisory warning of a heightened threat of domestic extremist violence from people angry at Trump's election defeat and inspired by the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol. During the confirmation process, Mayorkas had strong support among Senate Democrats as well as the backing of 4 former DHS secretaries, the country's largest police union, and many pro-immigrant activists. He was born in Havana and came to the U.S. when he was about a year old with his family, moving first to Florida and then to California. Some Republican senators raised concerns over Mayorkas' actions related to an investor visa program while working in the administration of former President Barack Obama. Oh, really, that's what they're going to concern themselves with after 4 years of the most corrupt presidency the world has ever seen? Really? Okay, with that, we're going to go to our break. And when we get back from that break, because we got to take a deep breath or two. When we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, not your granddad's Western. Paul Greengrass's new film, News of the World, is a Western for those who don't usually flock to Westerns. While there are nail-biting action scenes, the movie is essentially an unhurried drama about two damaged people trying to put their lives back together. The film centers around two characters. The first is Tom Hanks's Captain Jefferson Kyle Kidd, a former Confederate officer and publisher turned storyteller who visits towns in Texas delivering the news to paying audiences. Like a radio presenter, before radio, Kidd ends his shows on an optimistic note, usually about the persistence of the human spirit. It's needed as much of the population is illiterate and still recovering from the Civil War. Notable in a vaguely contemporary way are his audience's reactions to real news. It's during one such trip that Kidd encounters 10-year-old Johanna, a German immigrant adopted by the Kiowa people after her family perished in an incident between the natives and settlers. Johanna is then orphaned a second time after another incident eliminates her adopted native family. Most of the film's action occurs as Kidd transports the girl to an aunt and uncle at the direction of the occupying forces. Johanna, played with few words by award-winning German child actress Helena Zengel, steals every scene she's in. Barely remembering her German family and not being fully Kiowan, she's a mess of fear, hurt, and distrust. The pair's epic journey past obstacles, natural and human, is an analog for Johanna's journey to find her place. Hanks is a natural here as her guide and protector, as fast with a gun as he is wise in his judgment. The acting in News of the World, combined with stunning set design and cinematography, make for a genuinely rewarding experience. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I'm Scientific American Assistant News Editor Sarah Lewin Fraser, and here's a short piece from the January 2021 issue of the magazine in the section called Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. The article is titled Quick Hits, and it's a rundown of some non-coronavirus stories from around the globe. In Costa Rica, researchers embedded GPS devices in decoy sea turtle eggs to track poaching patterns. In their first field test, 5 of the 101 decoys, which had similar size, weight, and texture to real eggs, traveled significantly, potentially reaching consumers. In Latvia, DNA harvested from a 700-year-old public toilet in Riga, as well as a 600-year-old cesspit in Jerusalem, will help researchers examine how human microbiomes have evolved over time. Microbial DNA from both sites matches some species common in modern hunter-gatherers and some in today's city dwellers. In Antarctica, new analysis suggests a 50-million-year-old foot bone found on Seymour Island comes from a species of bird whose wingspan reaches 6.4 meters across. The researchers also attributed part of a large jawbone with tooth-like structures to the species. In a Madagascar garden, researchers found several Voltsko's chameleons, a rare species whose females can change from green to a vivid black, white, and blue when excited. The short-lived species had not been documented for more than 100 years, and no females were previously recorded at all. In Indonesia, new research shows that fluffy but venomous slow lorises frequently bite one another to settle territorial disputes, a rarity in venomous animals. In Australia, an enormous newfound coral reef off the continent's northern coast is taller than the Empire State Building, rising more than 500 meters above the seafloor. Considered part of the Great Barrier Reef, it is the first detached reef structure discovered there in 120 years. That was Quick Hits. I'm Sarah Lewin Fraser.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on the Lowe versus Lawler case, also known as the Danbury Hatters case. In 1902, the United Hatters of North America attempted to organize the fur hat company, D.E. Lowe & Company. Lowe refused to meet with the union. The union struck and called for a nationwide boycott of Lowe hats. The AFL assisted in popularizing the boycott. They worked to convince retailers and customers not to buy from Lowe. The company sued the union's business agent and hundreds of its members. Lowe claimed the union violated the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 by interfering with interstate commerce. The Sherman Act had been designed to control big business monopolies, trusts, and cartels like the Standard Oil Company. An 1893 case, United States versus Workingmen's Amalgamated Council of New Orleans, established that the Sherman Act applied to labor unions as well. In the Danbury Hatters case, the Supreme Court ruled that the union combined to restrain trade or commerce among several states. The union countered by arguing that the union did not interfere with the transportation of hats and were not themselves engaged in interstate commerce. But the union lost. In addition to violating the Sherman Act, the court argued that individual union members could be held personally liable for damages incurred by their unions. The union was eventually held liable in damages amounting to $235,000. The AFL pushed back, demanding reforms in the Sherman Act. Partial reforms came with the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914, but it would be another 20 years before the Norris-LaGuardia Act would exempt organized labor from antitrust injunctions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
After President Biden's much publicized Oval Office meeting with 10 Republican senators on Monday, he met with Senate Democrats in a virtual meeting on Tuesday and told them that a $618 billion coronavirus relief package proposed by the Republicans is, quote, way too small. Biden, pushing for a $1.9 trillion package, urged lawmakers to, quote, go big. The Senate, now under Democratic control, took a step toward passing Biden's stimulus package with a simple majority. That would allow Democrats to pass Biden's plan without the 10 Republican votes they would need to avoid a filibuster. The Politico Playbook on Wednesday morning, citing an unnamed, quote, Biden advisor, is attributing the president's tough stance to his chief of staff and pointing out that 5 of the most important policy wonks in the White House right now all served in the early Obama administration, and that the main lesson they learned from the fraught journey of the stimulus and Obamacare was that Barack Obama wasted too much time in negotiations with Republicans who were never going to get to yes. And this unnamed Biden advisor is quoted as saying, Ron has this whole thing. Remember how they effed us on the Affordable Care Act. If true, more power to them. With the start of Trump's second impeachment trial in the Senate less than a week away, House impeachment managers filed a brief charging the former president with being, quote, singularly responsible for inciting the insurrection last month at the U.S. Capitol. The filing also underscored how rioters themselves have been citing Trump as the reason they attacked. Well, Trump's new lawyers filed their response a few hours later. Their argument seems to be that the president's speech is protected by the First Amendment. And they claim it's unconstitutional to move forward with impeachment since Trump is no longer in office. But Dems have pointed out that Trump was impeached while he was president, and prior impeachment proceedings for other U.S. officials have run past the subject's time in office. The second of Trump's Senate impeachment trials is set to start next week. Well, what a difference an election makes. You know, after the 2016 elections, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said,
you can't win them all, and elections have consequences.
So what do losing Republicans do? They double down on the voter suppression tactics. According to a new report from the Brennan Center for Justice, 28 states have introduced, pre-filed, or are advancing 106 restrictive bills this year, most of them related to things like limiting vote-by-mail options, imposing voter ID laws, and making voter purging policies more aggressive. In Georgia, where a slim majority of voters chose Biden and helped flip the Senate control to Democrats, the Republican state senators have introduced a big slate of such bills that aim to throttle no-excuse absentee voting and automatic voter registration. Republican Party leaders have made no secret that such voting changes are high on their priority list, despite a lack of evidence of widespread voter fraud. Well, if you're frustrated because you're unable to get a vaccine, you're not alone. The Biden administration announced Tuesday that it would start sending some vaccine doses directly to pharmacies. Many pharmacies are already administering vaccine doses distributed through state systems, but this new program will create a direct pipeline from the federal government to pharmacies. It's all part of an effort to make vaccines more widely available. The White House said they will start by sending 1 million doses per week to 6,500 pharmacies. Those deliveries will be in addition to the weekly shipment to states, which totaled 10.5 million doses this week. So when will things start getting back to normal? Dr. Fauci said that about 70 to 85% of the U.S. population should be fully vaccinated before we can start returning to some semblance of normalcy. Right now, we stand at about 2%. President Biden on Tuesday signed 3 executive orders on immigration that he said would make the U.S. immigration system more fair, orderly, and humane. One of those orders establishes a task force to reunite children who were separated from their families at the Mexican border under a Trump policy designed to discourage illegal immigration. A second order addresses the surge in asylum applications and looks at replacing Trump's Remain in Mexico policy for people seeking asylum. And the third one calls for federal agencies to perform a top-to-bottom review of current immigration policies. Those orders came as the Senate confirmed Alejandro Mayorkas as Homeland Security Secretary, the first Latino and immigrant to hold that job. The Senate on Tuesday also confirmed former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg as President Biden's Transportation Secretary. Buttigieg is now the first openly gay cabinet member in U.S. history to win Senate confirmation, and at 39, he's the youngest member of Biden's cabinet. He was confirmed by a vote of 86 to 13. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered hundreds of Pentagon Advisory Board members to resign this month. He's essentially purging a few dozen who were appointed at the last minute under the Trump administration. During the last 2 months of his tenure, former acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller removed longtime members from defense policy, health, science, and business boards and replaced many of them with Trump loyalists. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was sentenced to more than 2.5 years in prison on Tuesday by a Moscow court. The verdict sparked protests all across the country and swift condemnation abroad. Navalny was first detained 2 weeks ago after returning to Moscow from Berlin, where he was recovering from poisoning. But the court ruled that while he was there, he violated probation terms from a 2014 case. Navalny's defense was that he was gravely ill at the time. You think? He also called the Russian president Putin the poisoner, referring to the claims that the Russian government was responsible for his poisoning. Following the verdict, U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken called on the Russian government to, quote, immediately and unconditionally release Navalny. The UK, Germany, France, and others issued similar statements. And finally, slain Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick lay in honor Tuesday night in the U.S. Capitol, allowing his colleagues and the lawmakers he protected during the siege on the Capitol to pay their respects. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden were among the mourners. Sicknick died while defending the Capitol on January 6th against the mob that stormed the building and interrupted the Electoral College count after Trump urged supporters on the National Mall to, quote, fight like hell to overturn his defeat. It should be noted that both CNN and MSNBC devoted a lot of airtime covering the solemn ceremony. Fox, well, they stuck with a regular Sean Hannity show and offered no coverage at all.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit with light snow piling up outside as we speak. Expecting to be a tad cooler than yesterday, maybe in the low 40s, if that warm. And our snow will be turning to rain in just a moment, bringing with it, maybe a little more than 1/10 of an inch, and maybe 1/10 of an inch. Though right now, it seems like we'll have snow for just a bit more. Partly cloudy skies tonight, lows in the upper 20s, winds will remain light and variable, and will remain light and variable tomorrow with partly cloudy skies, highs in the mid-upper 40s. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now risen precipitously to 7,553, with 103 confirmed deceased. So much for infections going slower. That was quite a big jump there. Pollen right outside the window here in Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index for the region is good at 31 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains low at 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.07 inches. Visibility is at 3 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. I should mention we're also in a winter weather advisory, or a winter storm warning, actually. They upgraded it. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd purchased, and this crowd put these crowdsourced weather stations somewhere where they live, and that's how they crowdsource for this weather report. They do. Okay, we'll tighten it up by next week, okay? We'll get a good tag for that. London is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 51 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 60 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 33 and cloudy. Kabul is 38 with its winter smoke. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 41 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 68 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 and fair. And New York is 33 degrees and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by, a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd decided to crowdsource, and they're all part of a crowd. And that's how we get the weather from around the world. David Brunstrom and Simon Lewis of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Biden administration said it is in no hurry to engage with China, a strategic rival it has vowed to outcompete, and said it would do so once it was in lockstep with allies and partners. President Joe Biden has spoken to many world leaders since taking office on January 20th, but has yet to speak to his Chinese counterpart, and the White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki told a briefing she could not say when a call might take place. Psaki said that with Antony Blinken in place as U.S. Secretary of State, there are additional layers to engage with the Chinese. But both she and State Department spokesman Ned Price said speaking to allies and partners came first. Price told a briefing there were issues, including climate change, in which it is our national interest to cooperate on a limited basis with China. He said U.S. alliances and partnerships were a force multiplier across any range of challenges, and that includes in our relationship with Beijing. So as a first step, we want to make sure that we are in lockstep with those allies, in lockstep with those partners, and then you can expect that there will be engagement in several areas with China.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Two Polish historians are facing a libel trial for a scholarly examination of Polish behavior during World War II, a case whose outcome is expected to determine the fate of independent Holocaust research under Poland's white nationalist government. A verdict is expected in Warsaw's district court on February 9th in the case against Barbara Engelking, a historian with the Polish Center for Holocaust Research in Warsaw, and Jan Grabowski, a professor of history at the University of Ottawa. It is the first major legal test in the wake of a 2018 law that makes it a crime to falsely accuse the Polish nation of crimes committed by Nazi Germany. The law caused a major diplomatic spat with Israel. Since it won power in 2015, the conservative ruling party Law and Justice has sought to discourage investigations into Polish wrongdoing during the wartime German occupation, preferring instead to almost exclusively stress Polish heroism and suffering. The aim is to promote national pride, but critics say the government has been whitewashing the fact that some Poles also collaborated in the German murder of Jews. The Israeli Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, said the legal effort constitutes a serious attack on free speech and open research. A number of historical institutions have condemned the case as the verdict nears, with the Paris-based Foundation for the Memory of the Shoah describing it Tuesday as a witch hunt and a pernicious invasion into the very heart of research. The case centers on a 1,600-page, 2-volume historical work in Polish, Night Without End, The Fate of Jews in Selected Counties of Occupied Poland, which was co-edited by Grabowski and Engelking. An abridged English version is due to be published in a few months. The historians say they see the case as an attempt to discredit them personally and to discourage other researchers from investigating the truth about the extermination of Jews in Poland. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.